Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to all of you. My name is Umer Khan, as has been introduced. I look after investment banking, corporate central and FI at the Bank of Punjab. Let's begin with some global numbers. The global battery electric vehicle sales during 2024 were about 13.3 million units, and this represented about 16% of the total global vehicle sales. No surprises, China is leading the show insofar as global EV sales are concerned, with over 50%, rather over 60% of global EV sales going to China. In terms of EV adoption and conversion, the role of national subsidies cannot be overemphasized. So in the case of China, which has been leading this global conversion, in a period of about 14 years, a grand total of about 231 billion US dollars were spent in national subsidies, thereby allowing consumers to shift to EVs. Also, I think one important factor that is relevant in the case of China is its dominance in battery manufacturing, and over 70% of global lithium-ion battery capacities are available in China. So no surprises. In terms of the top three podium positions, China is number one, Europe is number two, and within Europe, Norway leads the way with over 90% EV penetration, whereas in Germany is the overall largest EV market by volume. US, despite whatever we have been talking about, is number three. In terms of leading players in the global EV market, BYD is by far the largest supplier, producer, manufacturer. In 2024 alone, it sold about 1.2 million units. Tesla is a distant second. In the case of Tesla, the strategy is very clear. They are building a $1 billion US gigafactory. They are focusing on building domestic capacity, and we will hear more about it during the day, I'm sure, in terms of the tariff wars that are taking place. And also, they are making full utilization of the tariff incentives which have been on offer under the IRA. In the case of BYD, they have a very comprehensive supply chain, almost a stranglehold in terms of supply chain control in China. They have almost complete vertical integration, and they have extensive government collaboration for EV infrastructure development. European OEMs are focusing on hybrid electric platforms. The role of government support cannot be overemphasized. 230 billion US dollars over a period of 14 years is one of the key and one of the more fundamental reasons for this EV adoption. So because of the tariff challenges, China is focusing a lot more in terms of shifting its manufacturing capacities to different regions. Pakistan has been one of the recent entrants also, and we will talk about it also. BYD holds a 40% market share in Thailand. They have plans for newer factories in Brazil in 2025. They have got a very strong presence in Africa and Latin America also. What does this mean for Pakistan? So for us, it presents an opportunity for local assembly. And obviously, BYD and the MAGA group, they have already entered into an assembly partnership for development, production, assembly, and sale of BYD models in Pakistan, consumer segment. It also means that Pakistan, because given the tariff wars, it puts Pakistan and a couple of other countries in a very unique position, because what we can do is we can sort of bypass and become a regional export hub insofar as export of these EV units are concerned. And there is some work already happening on that front. There is also some discussion. What it means is that we can also focus on infrastructure development in terms of collaborations on charging stations and building production for a robust supply chain. Financing, I think, is one of the biggest pieces in any puzzle that we ought to solve for. And given that I'm a banker, I think this is something which is very close to my heart also. So what are some of the models that we have seen elsewhere in the world? Let's talk about consumer loans for a bit. In the case of Europe also, like Germany's KfW Bank, they provide zero interest rate loans for EV buyers. And I think this is a model that we are also trying to follow here in Pakistan to improve the adoption. Tesla and Volkswagen, they have got fantastic leasing options, which provide reduced upfront costs and also a facility for easier upgrades. In the case of US, there are tax credits for about $7,500 US for every EV purchase. and battery as a service. In the case of large-scale project financings, it's important. Government support is important. We spoke about it earlier. We're talking about it now also. So Tesla received a huge loan from the Energy Fund of the Department of Defense for EV production. So that aided a lot. Green bonds. So commercial banks represent one avenue of financing for large infrastructure projects when we talk about EV assembly units or BEV units. But in addition to having commercial banks on side, it is also important that we have other participants, other capital providers, what we call the capital market participants. So to make sure that they have got their finger in this pie also, green bonds as a concept, as an instrument, are increasingly used in the world. In the case of Pakistan also, they have been used, but not in EV space. They have been used more on the energy generation side in the case of WAPDA's bond. So how did the financing evolve? In the last decade, where this was coming up, again, the role of government grants, subsidies, tax credits was very, very significant in terms of converting consumers and shifting the preferences. And we have talked about some of these examples. But what is happening now is that obviously the government coffers run dry. And again, this is going to be an important consideration in the case of Pakistan, where we are always hamstrung by lack of capital or lack of availability of capital. Because whenever we talk about any kind of grants or subsidies or credits, this is effectively money which is coming out of government's coffers. Since the start of this decade, 21 and onwards, what we are seeing increasingly in the world is that the reliance on government subsidies, it's not eliminated, but it's gradually reducing because they have been through that entire decade of conversion already. It may be a little different for Pakistan, but that is what is happening there. And then increasingly, private sector participation, the role of banks, the role of non-bank capital market participants, it's increasing in terms of funding. Also, there are certain integrated financing models which are now taking shape, not just the upfront capital cost, but also maintenance, insurance, and battery leasing options are coming into play, making decisions easier for buyers. But very briefly, we'll just look at the global issues right now, and I think there is going to be a separate session on which we will talk about Pakistani specific issues. The cost of batteries obviously is a very significant element that needs to be looked at. It's a very important consideration for purchasers. So that high upfront cost and the depreciation associated with it is an important consideration, and it's an issue. Charging station availability, even on a global scale, it is spotty in different regions, and that is why it is a huge challenge to be contended with. Again, there are limitations on battery warranty and useful life, resale value, uncertainty. So these are some of the things that around the world countries are grappling with. So what is happening? What can be done about overcoming these challenges? One thing that is important is that, and I'm sure it's important for us here in Pakistan also, those of you who are familiar, because Pakistan is always constrained for availability of foreign currency. So whenever a large capital expenditure project is supposed to take place, whether it's not necessarily just only linked to EV, it is linked to any large scale infrastructure project, whether it's a conventional power plant or a fertilizer plant or a container terminal. Because Pakistan's foreign currency reserves are short, the central bank always wants, and because most of these projects have a very high import component, EV plants are also not an exception. So what the central bank dictates is, what it wants is that those project developers and their lenders, they have to arrange at least 50% of the import component in the form of foreign currency, whether it comes in the form of foreign currency loans or it comes in the form of foreign equity. And the idea is that the drain on national foreign currency reserves should be lessened. It is not eliminated, but at least it is lessened. The argument and our suggestion on that front is that to improve the adoption of EVs, because policy planners need to take a longer term impact, this is effectively by having these assembly plants, EV assembly plants, and associated infrastructure in the country, this would reduce Pakistan's petroleum imports. So State Bank should be requested or may be requested to reduce this condition when we talk about EV and EVs enabling infrastructure. In addition to direct funding, there are large global pots of funding and credit enhancements available in the form of Green Climate Fund. There are multitudes of funds available. There are loans on relatively lower interest rates that are available. There are credit guarantees, there are portfolio guarantees that are available. The idea is to have a unified national stance and a cohesive strategy so that we as a country are able to make use of these credit enhancements, because they will effectively serve to reduce the risk profile for commercial bankers and investors, and thereby improve the availability of funding and the absolute amount of projects that can get undertaken. Again, in terms of large scale funding, there are certain initiatives that we are undertaking as Bank of Punjab. Also, very important that the role of sponsors cannot be overemphasized. I think if we are trying to make sure that we grow this ecosystem, especially for large projects, I think it's very important that the sponsors and the developers which undertake these projects, they are the bluest of the blue chip, because by having the right set of sponsors, if the building block is right, that large or that blue chip sponsoring group will make sure that all the feasibilities are in place. They would not try to hoodwink the commercial banks in terms of making very rosy projections. So they will make sure that the entire chain and the entire set of stakeholders works accordingly. So the role of good sponsors cannot be overemphasized. Again, when you look at all of these countries and the regions, China, Europe, USA, in case of, and rest of the world also, reliance in terms of conversion, in terms of adoption, the role of subsidies, tax credits, tax breaks, and fiscal incentives for different stakeholders, for project developers, for sponsors, for commercial bankers and investors. This is going to be the key, because let's not reinvent the wheel. This is what has been done in China, in Europe, in case of USA also. We worked with the AFD, which is French State Development Agency, and we have been able to secure a $54 million long-term concessional loan from them. And this loan has been borrowed on Bank of Punjab's own balance sheet, so they are taking a risk on us. And the idea is that this is the first ever climate-tied long-term financing facility, which is meant for undertaking climate-related projects, and obviously EV and EV infrastructure projects are a subset of this. And one of the first projects that we have undertaken after taking this facility is that we have tied up with the Mega Group based out of Karachi, who are, as I'm sure you are all aware, who are bringing in BYD's flagship projects to Pakistan, four-wheelers. So we are helping the Mega Group in terms of raising their project financing requirement, which is about $90 million. So the AFD facility that we took from, foreign currency facility that we took from AFD, we are providing them with $22 million of foreign currency, and we are also helping them raise the local currency. So I think this is, in terms of its utilization, it couldn't have been better rather than putting it up for this. Also on the consumer financing side, Bank of Punjab being owned by the government of Punjab, we have been involved with the interest-free bike scheme. Sure, some of you would be better informed than me, but the federal government is coming up with a very comprehensive EV scheme also, which will effectively roll up all of the various existing programs that the government is undertaking. The end user markup is going to be zero because the scheme will be fully subsidized by the federal government. In addition to it, because I'm sure as all of us are aware as interested stakeholders, they have higher upfront capital costs. So the government is also offering upfront subsidy for two-wheelers and three-wheelers. Also very important, because this will be disbursed through the commercial banks. Almost all commercial banks will be involved in this. And to safeguard the interests of commercial banks, 25% portfolio guarantees on first loss basis will be offered to the banks, which will be administered through the State Bank of Pakistan. I'm sure there are going to be more in-depth discussions on this in the following sessions, and I wish all of us a very enjoyable and informed afternoon. Thank you.